Hey there, and welcome back to Listen and Learn English. If you're here, it means you're serious about improving your English, and let me tell you, you're in the right place. Because learning a language isn't just about memorizing words. It's about listening, repeating, shadowing, and practicing until it becomes a part of you. That's why I always tell you, don't just listen passively. Pause, repeat, shadow my words. Engage with what you hear, because the more you do that, the more natural English will feel to you. And today, I want to share something personal, a small habit that completely changed the way I think. You know, people always talk about big changes. Moving to a new city, getting a new job, starting a new chapter in life. But sometimes it's the tiniest shift in your daily routine that makes the biggest impact. And for me, that small habit was journaling. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh no, not another person telling me to write in a journal, hear me out. Because I was just like you. I thought journaling was either something super emotional, like pouring my heart out on paper, or something only super organized people did to plan their lives. And I was neither. But one day, I decided to try it. Not in a structured way, not with fancy notebooks or a set routine. I just grabbed a random notebook and started writing a few sentences about my day. And I had no idea at the time, but that tiny action, just writing down a few thoughts, would completely transform the way I saw myself, my goals, and even my fears. Because here's the thing, when you write things down, you take them out of your head and put them in front of you. And when something is in front of you, it becomes real. It's no longer just a messy thought floating around. It's something you can see, analyze, and actually do something about. And this applies to everything, your goals, your fears, your dreams, even your worries. You know how sometimes a small problem feels huge in your mind? But then you tell a friend about it and suddenly it doesn't seem so bad. That's exactly what journaling does. And let me tell you, this small habit helped me break free from overthinking. Now, before we move forward, I want to stop and break something down. Break free. Say it with me. Break free. Again, break free. It means to escape from something that is holding you back, to free yourself from a negative situation, a bad habit, or even your own thoughts. Let me give you some examples. A person stuck in a toxic job finally decides to quit. They break free from the stress and find something better. Someone struggling with self-doubt learns to believe in themselves. They break free from their own limitations. A person in an unhealthy relationship finds the strength to walk away. They break free and start fresh. And in my case, journaling helped me break free from overthinking. Instead of letting my thoughts control me, I started controlling them. And once I realized that, everything changed. But that was just the beginning. Because as I kept writing, I started to see patterns. Things I kept worrying about, things I kept avoiding, things I wanted but never admitted to myself. And the more I saw those patterns, the more I started asking myself, why do I think this way? What's stopping me? And more importantly, how can I change it? And that's when my mindset truly started shifting. So there I was, writing in this random notebook every day, not thinking too much about it. Some days I wrote about things that made me happy. Other days, I just vented, poured out all the little frustrations that had been piling up in my head, and then something weird happened. I started noticing patterns, things I complained about over and over, fears that kept showing up, goals I kept saying I wanted but never took action on. And one day, I flipped through my old pages and saw something that stopped me in my tracks. I had written the same sentence, word for word, at least 5 different times over the past few months. I wish I was more confident when speaking in meetings. I stared at that sentence 5 times. I had written the same thing 5 times. That meant I had been struggling with the same issue for months, and I had done absolutely nothing about it. And that's when I realized something important. Awareness is the first step to change. See, we all have things we want to improve: our confidence, our habits, our communication skills. But most of the time, we don't even realize how often these struggles repeat themselves. And when you don't realize something, you can't fix it. But when you see it in front of you, written down in black and white, you can no longer ignore it. Now, before I move forward, let's pause and break something down. Stop in your tracks. Say it with me. Stop in your tracks. Again, stop in your tracks. This phrase means to suddenly stop because you are shocked, surprised, or realizing something important. Here are some examples. A student walking into an exam suddenly remembers they forgot to study one whole chapter. They stop in their tracks, realizing their mistake. A person scrolling through old photos finds a picture of a long-lost friend. They stop in their tracks, overwhelmed by memories. Someone reading through their journal notices a pattern they never saw before. They stop in their tracks, realizing they need to make a change. And that's exactly what happened to me. Seeing my own words staring back at me made me stop in my tracks. I had been complaining about my confidence, but I hadn't done anything about it. So I made a decision. I told myself, enough is enough. If I wanted to stop feeling insecure, I had to take action. And journaling had already given me the first gift, awareness. Now I needed the second step, deliberate practice. I started small. Every time I spoke in a meeting, I made a note in my journal. Did I speak clearly? Did I hesitate? Did I feel nervous? And every day I gave myself one challenge. One day it was speak at least once in the meeting. The next day it was speak without using filler words like and The day after that, it was make eye contact when speaking. And slowly, I started seeing a shift. Now, let's pause for another breakdown. Enough is enough. Say it with me. Enough is enough. Again, enough is enough. This phrase is used when you've had enough of a situation and are ready to take action or make a change. Let's go through some examples. A person in a stressful job finally decides to quit. They say, enough is enough. I deserve better. Someone struggling with unhealthy habits wakes up one morning and says, enough is enough. I'm changing my lifestyle. A student constantly procrastinates until one day they decide to take control. They say, enough is enough. No more wasting time. And that's exactly what I told myself when I realized I had been complaining about the same thing for months. Enough is enough. It was time to take charge of my own confidence. And guess what? The more I practiced, the more I improved. Because confidence isn't something you magically get one day. It's something you build. Journaling had given me a mirror, a way to see my own patterns, and once I saw them, I could finally start changing them. Little by little, I started feeling different, more in control, less nervous, and it all started with one tiny habit, writing down my thoughts. But that was just the beginning. Now here's the thing about making a change. It doesn't happen overnight. I didn't just wake up one day, feel confident, and start speaking fluently in every meeting. No, it was a process. A messy, slow, and sometimes frustrating process. Because even after I told myself enough is enough, I still had doubts. I still had moments where my voice would shake or my mind would go blank. And honestly, at one point, I almost gave up. But then I reminded myself of something important: progress, not perfection. See, we often expect ourselves to be perfect the moment we start something new. And when we're not, we feel discouraged. But the truth is, growth isn't about being perfect. It's about getting a little better each day. And that's what I focused on. Every time I spoke up, even if it was just for a few seconds, I reminded myself, this is progress. Now let's pause and break something down. Wake up one day. Say it with me. Wake up one day. Again, wake up one day. This phrase is often used to describe a sudden realization or change, usually after a long period of not noticing something. Let's go through some examples. A person who has been eating unhealthy food for years suddenly looks in the mirror and decides to change. They say, I just woke up one day and realized I need to take care of myself. Someone stuck in a toxic relationship suddenly sees the truth and decides to leave. I woke up one day and knew I deserved better. An artist struggling with self-doubt finally gets the courage to share their work. I woke up one day and thought, why not? But the thing is, most change doesn't actually happen in one day. It happens in tiny steps over time. And that's what I had to remind myself. Small wins add up. And speaking of small wins, I want to tell you about one particular day that changed things for me. I was in a meeting, one of those meetings where usually I'd stay quiet and just nod along. But that day, something felt different. Maybe it was because I had been writing about my progress every night. Maybe it was because I had made a promise to myself to at least try. But for whatever reason, when the discussion slowed down and there was a moment of silence, I took a deep breath and spoke. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. I didn't give a long speech. I just added a small comment. But the moment I finished speaking, my manager looked at me, nodded, and said, "That's a great point." And right there, I felt something shift. Because in that moment, I realized something important. Most of the time, we're the only ones holding ourselves back. I had spent months convincing myself that my voice wasn't important, that I wasn't ready, that I needed to be perfect before I spoke up. But all of that was just in my head, and once I saw that, everything changed. Let's pause for another breakdown. Holding yourself back. Say it with me. Holding yourself back. Again, holding yourself back. This phrase means to stop yourself from doing something because of fear, doubt, or hesitation. Here are some examples. A talented musician never shares their songs because they're afraid of judgment. They're holding themselves back. A student doesn't ask questions in class even when they're confused. They're holding themselves back. Someone wants to start a business but keeps waiting for the perfect time. They're holding themselves back. And that's exactly what I had been doing. I was holding myself back. No one else was stopping me. It was just my own fear. And once I understood that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started showing up differently. I spoke a little more each day. I took notes on my progress. I reminded myself, this is a journey, not a race. And little by little, I became the kind of person I had always wanted to be, someone who speaks up, someone who trusts their voice, someone who believes in their own growth. And it all started with one small habit. But this journey wasn't just about speaking up in meetings. This habit affected so many other areas of my life. And in the next part, I'll tell you exactly how. So at this point, I had already started noticing a shift in the way I carried myself. I was speaking up more. I was no longer stuck in that cycle of holding myself back. You remember that phrase, right? Holding yourself back. Stopping yourself from doing something because of fear or hesitation. But the most surprising thing, it didn't just change the way I spoke at work. See, when you start proving to yourself that you can do something, even if it's just one small thing, it starts spreading into every other part of your life. It's like a domino effect. You push over one, and suddenly, everything else starts moving too. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because before this, I had a habit of avoiding things. Avoiding conversations, avoiding difficult tasks, avoiding any situation where I might feel uncomfortable. But once I started this habit, once I made a commitment to show up for myself, even in small ways, I saw a huge difference. Let's pause for a breakdown. Show up for yourself. Say it with me. Show up for yourself. Again, show up for yourself. This means to take action and do things that benefit you, even when it's hard or uncomfortable. Let's go through some examples. You're exhausted after work, but instead of skipping your workout, you do even just 10 minutes of movement. You're showing up for yourself. You feel nervous about applying for a new job, but you send in your resume anyway. You're showing up for yourself. You're afraid to start learning a new skill because you think you'll be bad at it, but you do it anyway. You're showing up for yourself. And that's exactly what I started doing. Every time I felt fear creeping in, I reminded myself, just show up, even if it's messy. Even if it's uncomfortable, just show up. And because of that, I started doing things I never imagined myself doing. One of the biggest ones, I finally started learning a new language. Now listen, I had wanted to learn this language for years, but every time I thought about it, I got overwhelmed. I'd tell myself, I don't have time. I don't know where to start. I'll probably sound ridiculous, but then I caught myself. That was the old me talking, the one who was always waiting for the perfect moment, the one who was always holding myself back. So I made a decision. I told myself, just start, even if it's 5 minutes a day, even if I make mistakes. And guess what? That small habit, showing up for myself, made all the difference. Within a few weeks, I was already picking up new words. Within a few months, I was able to have basic conversations. And it all started with that one tiny change, the habit of proving to myself that I could do hard things. And speaking of doing hard things, let's break down another phrase, catching yourself. Say it with me, catching yourself. Again, catching yourself. This means to notice when you're about to do something unhelpful or negative and stop yourself in the moment. Here are some examples. You're about to say something mean in an argument, but you catch yourself and take a deep breath instead. You're about to procrastinate on an important task, but you catch yourself and decide to just start. You're about to make an excuse for why you can't do something, but you catch yourself and remember your goal. And that's exactly what I had to do. I had to catch myself every time I wanted to give in to self-doubt. Every time I told myself I can't do this. Every time I wanted to retreat into my comfort zone. And the more I did that, the more things started changing. Because once you train yourself to catch those moments and choose action instead, everything in your life starts shifting. And the best part, it becomes second nature. At first, it's hard. At first, you have to remind yourself constantly. But over time, it just becomes who you are. And let me tell you, when you become someone who believes in themselves, who takes action, who doesn't let fear win, you feel unstoppable. And that's when things really get interesting. So at this point, I had already made some huge changes. I had started showing up for myself. I had started catching myself in those moments of doubt, and I had started proving day after day that I could actually follow through. And that's an important phrase right there. Follow through. Say it with me. Follow through. Again, follow through. This means to complete something you start, to do what you said you would do, even when it's hard. Let's go through some real-life examples. You tell yourself you'll wake up early to work out, and even though you're tired, you actually do it. You followed through. You promise your friend you'll help them move this weekend, and even though you feel lazy that day, you still go. You followed through. You start learning English, and instead of quitting when it gets hard, you keep going. You're following through. And let me tell you, this one habit alone, It's a game changer because when you become the kind of person who follows through, your entire life transforms. Think about it. Most people start things and never finish. They say they'll do something, but when things get tough, they give up. But when you train yourself to follow through, even when you don't feel like it, suddenly you start seeing results everywhere. And this brings me to another phrase, push through. Say it with me, push through. Again, push through. This means to keep going even when something is difficult, to not give up when you face challenges. Let's go through some examples. You're running a race and your legs feel like they're going to give out, but you keep going. You push through. You're studying for an exam and your brain is exhausted, but you don't stop. You push through. You're learning a new skill and you keep making mistakes, but instead of quitting, you keep practicing. You push through. And I had to do this a lot because let's be honest, changing your mindset isn't easy. There were days when I didn't want to keep up with my new habits. There were days when self-doubt crept back in. There were days when I thought, maybe I'm just not that kind of person. Maybe I'll never really change. But every time those thoughts came up, I reminded myself, just push through, just follow through, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. And slowly, something amazing started happening. The more I did it, the easier it got. Because at first, change is exhausting. It takes effort. It takes discipline. But after a while, it becomes natural. It becomes who you are. You stop needing motivation because it's just what you do now. You don't have to force yourself. You just show up. And when that happens, that's when you realize you've completely transformed. And the craziest part? It all started with one tiny change, one small habit, one decision to show up for myself every single day. So what about you? What's one small thing you can do starting today to begin this shift? Because trust me, once you start, you'll never look back. At this point, something inside me had changed. I was no longer the person who said, I'll start tomorrow. I was no longer the person who gave up the moment things got hard. I was actually doing the things I used to only talk about. And this brings me to another phrase, stay the course. Say it with me, stay the course. Again, stay the course. This means to keep going even when it's difficult, to continue toward your goal without getting discouraged. Let's go through some real-life examples. You start a new job, and at first it's overwhelming, but instead of quitting, you stay the course. You're training for a marathon, and halfway through, you feel like giving up, but you remind yourself to stay the course. You're learning English, and some days it feels impossible, but you trust the process and stay the course. And this is exactly what I had to do. There were moments when I felt like I was making no progress. There were times when I thought, is this even working? Am I just wasting my time? But I had to remind myself, stay the course. Because here's the truth. Most people quit right before they see results. They give up too soon. They stop right before the breakthrough. But the people who succeed, the ones who actually transform, they push through that phase. They stay the course. And this leads me to another phrase, turning point. Say it with me, turning point. Again, turning point. This means the moment when everything changes, the moment when you start to see real results. Let's go through some examples. You struggle in school for years, but one day something clicks and suddenly you understand everything. That's your turning point. You start a business and at first it's slow, but then one big client comes in and everything changes. That's your turning point. You practice English every day, and for months it feels like nothing is happening. But then one day you have a conversation without overthinking. That's your turning point. And let me tell you, when you reach that turning point, it's the best feeling in the world. Because suddenly, everything that felt impossible, it just clicks. You realize all that effort, all that struggle, it wasn't for nothing. It was building you up, preparing you for this moment. And once you hit that turning point, there's no going back. You're not just trying to change anymore. You have changed. You've become the person you always wanted to be. So what about you? Where are you on this journey? Are you still in that phase where it feels impossible? Where you're wondering if it's even worth it? If so, let me tell you this. Stay the course, because your turning point is coming. You just have to keep going long enough to see it. So there I was, showing up, pushing through, staying the course. And then, one day, something strange happened. I wasn't thinking about the habit anymore. I wasn't forcing myself to do it. It had just become part of my day, part of my routine, part of who I was. And that's when I realized I had reached my breakthrough. Say it with me. Breakthrough. Again. Breakthrough. This means a big moment of progress, a sudden realization, or a major achievement after a long struggle. Let's go through some real-life examples. You've been studying English for months and suddenly, one day, you understand a whole conversation without translating in your head. That's a breakthrough. You've been working out, and for weeks, nothing seems to change. Then one day, you notice your body is stronger. That's a breakthrough. You've been stuck on a problem at work, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the solution comes to you. That's a breakthrough. And in that moment, I felt unstoppable. Because when you reach a breakthrough, when you finally see that all your effort is paying off, it changes everything. You stop wondering if you'll succeed. You know it's only a matter of time. You stop questioning yourself. You trust that you can figure things out. And that mindset, that's where real transformation happens. Because once you know you can push through the hard parts, once you know you can stay the course, you start applying that same belief to everything. And this brings me to another phrase, second nature. Say it with me. Second nature, again, second nature. This means something that once felt difficult but now feels completely natural, something you do automatically without thinking. Let's go through some examples. At first, driving a car felt impossible, but now you don't even have to think about it. It's second nature. When you first started speaking English, you had to translate every word, but now some phrases just come out naturally. It's second nature. At first, waking up early was a struggle, but now your body just does it on its own. It's second nature. And that's exactly what had happened to me. The habit that once felt like a chore had become second nature. I wasn't forcing myself anymore. It just felt normal. And that's when I realized I had become a completely different person. I wasn't just someone who wanted to change. I had changed, and it all started with one small habit, one little shift, one decision to keep showing up every single day. So let me ask you, what's that one habit for you? What's the small thing you can commit to starting today that could change everything over time? Because here's the truth, your breakthrough is waiting. Your transformation is already happening. You just have to keep going long enough to see it. Here's the thing about change. It never stays small. It starts with just one little shift, one tiny decision, but that one small habit, it creates a ripple effect. Say it with me, ripple effect. Again, ripple effect. This means one small action that leads to bigger and bigger changes, like ripples in the water when you drop a stone. Let's go through some real-life examples. You decide to read for 10 minutes a day. That small habit leads to learning more, thinking differently, and eventually, maybe even writing your own book. That's a ripple effect. You start exercising for just 5 minutes in the morning. That small habit leads to feeling stronger, eating healthier, and having more energy throughout the day. That's a ripple effect. You commit to speaking just one sentence in English every day. That small habit builds your confidence, helps you think in English, and suddenly you're having full conversations. That's a ripple effect. And that's exactly what happened to me. The habit I started, it didn't just change one thing in my life. It changed everything. It changed the way I saw myself. It changed the way I approached challenges. It changed the way I handled setbacks. And this leads me to another phrase, game changer. Say it with me, game changer. Again, game changer. This means something that completely changes the situation, something that makes a huge difference. Let's go through some examples. You find a new way to study that makes learning much easier. That's a game changer. You switch from memorizing grammar rules to actually practicing conversations. That's a game changer. You start waking up early, and suddenly you have time for everything you always wanted to do. That's a game changer. And for me, this one small habit, it was a game changer. It wasn't just about the habit itself. It was about proving to myself that I could be consistent, that I could stick with something, that I could create change in my own life. And once I saw that, once I felt that, I started applying it to everything. I stopped waiting for motivation. I stopped waiting for the perfect moment because I realized it's never about feeling ready. It's about starting even when you don't feel like it. It's about taking small steps, even when progress feels slow. And over time, those small steps turn into something big. They create a ripple effect. They become a game changer. And suddenly, you wake up one day and realize you are not the same person you used to be. You've grown, you've improved, you've transformed, and it all started with one small habit. So, what about you? What's one small change you can make today that could lead to something bigger tomorrow? Because trust me, every big transformation, it always starts small. Here's something I never expected. Once that one small habit became second nature, once it became a game changer in my life, something even more surprising happened. I stopped feeling like I was treading water. Say it with me, treading water. Again, treading water. This means making an effort just to stay in the same place, struggling to keep up, not really moving forward. Let's go through some examples. You feel like you're working hard every day, but your life isn't improving. You're just treading water. You've been learning English for a while, but you don't feel like you're getting better. You're just treading water. You keep going to the gym, but without a plan, you're not seeing any progress. You're just treading water. That's how I used to feel. Like no matter what I did, I wasn't moving forward. I was just barely keeping up. But when I committed to that one small habit, everything shifted. I went from treading water to gaining momentum. Say it with me, gaining momentum. Again, gaining momentum. This means starting to make progress faster and faster, moving forward with more energy and confidence. Let's go through some examples. At first, learning English felt slow, but now you're picking up words faster, and conversations feel easier. You're gaining momentum. You started exercising for just 5 minutes a day, and now you're naturally working out longer and feeling stronger. You're gaining momentum. You struggled to wake up early at first, but now your body naturally gets up before the alarm. You're gaining momentum. And that's what happens when you show up consistently. You start small, it feels slow. At first, you don't see results. But if you keep going day after day, something shifts. You stop treading water, you start gaining momentum, and before you know it, you're doing things you once thought were impossible. That's the real power of consistency. It's not just about the habit itself. It's about proving to yourself that you can change, that you can grow, that you can become the person you've always wanted to be. So think about it. What's that one small habit that could get you out of feeling stuck? What's one simple thing you can commit to today, even if it feels tiny? Because remember, every big change starts with a small step. And if you keep going, if you stay the course, one day you'll look back and realize you're not the same person anymore. You've grown, you've changed, you've transformed, and it all started with one small decision. Here's the truth. Once you start gaining momentum, something incredible happens. You don't just feel like you're making progress, you feel unstoppable. Say it with me. Unstoppable. Again, unstoppable. It means so determined and full of energy that nothing can hold you back. Let's go through some examples. At first, speaking English felt intimidating, but now you're practicing every day and feeling more confident. You're unstoppable. You used to struggle with motivation, but now your habits are automatic and you're making real progress. You're unstoppable. You once hesitated to step out of your comfort zone, but now you're saying yes to new challenges. You're unstoppable. That's exactly what happened to me. That one small habit, it wasn't just about the action itself. It was about proving to myself that I could stick with something, that I could follow through, that I could commit to growth, no matter how slow it felt at first. And that leads me to another important phrase, turning point. Say it with me, turning point. Again, turning point. This means a moment when everything changes, when things take a new direction. Let's go through some examples. You were struggling with English, but then you started practicing with real conversations, and suddenly you improved fast. That was your turning point. You always put off exercising, but one day you decided to start, and now it's part of your routine. That was your turning point. You used to doubt yourself, but then you proved that you could stay consistent, and everything shifted. That was your turning point. And that's what this habit became for me, a turning point, a moment when everything changed. Not because the habit itself was magical, not because I suddenly had more time or energy, but because I showed up. Because I proved to myself that I could be consistent. And once I saw that, once I felt that, I realized there was no limit to what I could do. And the same is true for you. You are capable of more than you realize. You don't need a massive transformation overnight. You just need one small shift, one small step, one small habit. And if you stay with it, if you keep going, if you refuse to quit, that's when you become unstoppable. That's when you hit your turning point. That's when you look back and say, that one small habit, it changed everything. So tell me, what's your small habit going to be? What's the one simple thing you can commit to today? Because trust me, it's not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about creating it. You know what's funny? When I first started this small habit, I thought it was just about being productive. I thought, okay, if I do this every day, I'll be more organized, I'll get more done, I'll be more efficient. But I didn't realize it was shaping something much deeper, my mindset. Say it with me, mindset. Again, mindset. This means the way you think about things, your attitude, and your approach to challenges. Let's go through some examples. If you believe that mistakes are opportunities to learn, you have a strong mindset. If you always doubt yourself and think you'll fail, you have a negative mindset. If you see problems as challenges instead of obstacles, you have a growth mindset. And my mindset started shifting. I stopped looking for quick results. I stopped feeling frustrated when I didn't see instant progress. Instead, I started trusting the process. And that brings me to another phrase, trust the process. Say it with me, trust the process. Again, trust the process. This means believing that if you keep going, even when results are slow, things will work out in the end. Let's go through some examples. Learning English takes time, but if you practice every day, you'll get better. Trust the process. You don't see results from working out in 1 week, but if you stay consistent, your body will change. Trust the process. Success doesn't happen overnight, but if you keep improving, opportunities will come. Trust the process. And once I truly understood this, everything became easier. I wasn't forcing myself to show up every day. I wasn't waiting for motivation to hit me. I wasn't constantly questioning, is this working? Am I wasting my time? I just showed up. I trusted the process, and little by little, that trust turned into confidence. And confidence, that changes everything. Because when you trust yourself, when you trust your habits, when you trust that every small step is leading somewhere, that's when you stop feeling stuck. That's when you stop second guessing yourself. That's when you truly start moving forward. So tell me, do you trust the process, or are you still waiting for proof before you believe in yourself? Because here's the truth. The proof doesn't come first. The belief does. And once you believe in yourself, once you commit, once you trust the process, the results will come. They always do. You know what happens after a few weeks of sticking to a habit? You start feeling good. You start noticing little wins. You feel motivated, but then, out of nowhere, life happens. You get busy, you get tired, you miss a day, maybe two. And suddenly, that little voice in your head creeps in. Maybe I've already messed up. Maybe I should just quit. And this right here, this is the moment that separates people who succeed from people who give up. Because trust me, everyone feels this. And the people who keep going, they've mastered one thing, staying the course. Say it with me, staying the course. Again, staying the course. This means continuing something even when it's tough, even when you feel like quitting. Let's go through some examples. You started learning English, and even though you struggle sometimes, you don't stop. That's staying the course. You decided to work out, and even though progress is slow, you keep showing up. That's staying the course. You're building a new habit, and even after missing a few days, you get back on track. That's staying the course. And let me tell you, this is where most people fail, not because they're not capable, not because they're not smart enough, but because they think one bad day, one mistake, one setback means the whole thing is over. But that's not how it works. One bad day doesn't erase your progress. One mistake doesn't define you. The only thing that matters is whether you get back on track. Say it with me, get back on track. Again, get back on track. This means returning to your plan, your habit, or your goal after getting distracted or off course. Let's go through some examples. You stopped practicing English for a week, but today you're starting again. You're getting back on track. You skipped a few workouts, but now you're showing up again. You're getting back on track. You lost focus for a while, but you've decided to recommit to your goals. You're getting back on track. That's the key. That's what separates people who succeed from those who don't. Not perfection, not never messing up, but always finding a way to come back. And that's what I want you to take away from this. Your progress is never ruined by one bad day. It's only ruined if you give up completely. So if you've ever felt like you've fallen off, like you've lost momentum, like you've let yourself down, Stop being so hard on yourself. Just get back on track. Just stay the course. Because the truth is, you are not starting over. You are simply continuing from where you left off. And trust me, that is more than enough. You know, I used to think that once I built a habit, it would always feel easy. I thought if I just push through the first few weeks, I'll never struggle again. But wow, was I wrong? Because even after months, even after years, some days still feel hard. There are still moments when I wake up and don't feel like doing anything. There are still times when my motivation completely disappears. And this is the moment that really matters. Because when things get difficult, when you don't feel like showing up, when you start doubting yourself, that's the real test. And this brings me to a very important phrase. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Say it with me. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Again, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. This means when things become difficult, strong people don't quit. They push even harder. Let's go through some examples. You're learning English, and even though grammar is confusing, you keep practicing. That's when the going gets tough. The tough get going. You're building a business, and even though you've had setbacks, you don't stop. That's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. You're trying to improve your health, and even though you're exhausted, you stay committed. That's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's the mindset shift that changes everything. Because if you only show up when it's easy, you'll never reach your goals. Anyone can do something when they feel motivated. Anyone can be consistent when they're excited. But real progress happens when you keep going even when you don't feel like it. And this leads me to another important phrase, grit. Say it with me, grit. Again, grit. This means having the determination and mental strength to keep pushing forward no matter how hard it gets. Let's go through some examples. A student who fails an exam but keeps studying until they pass, that's grit. An athlete who loses a competition but trains even harder for the next one, that's grit. A person who faces setbacks but refuses to quit, that's grit. And let me tell you, grit is more important than talent. Because talent can only take you so far. Motivation can only take you so far. But grit? That will take you all the way, because when you have grit, you don't stop just because things get hard. You don't quit just because you don't see results right away. You keep pushing, you keep learning, you keep showing up. And that's what separates people who achieve great things from people who don't. It's not about being the smartest. It's not about being the most talented. It's about being the most persistent. Because at the end of the day, the people who win are the people who refuse to give up. So tell me, do you have grit, or are you still waiting for things to get easier before you commit? Because here's the truth, it never gets easier. You just get stronger. And once you understand that, once you accept that, once you embrace that, there's nothing you can't do. So here we are, after all these parts, after all these lessons, after all these moments of reflection. What's the one thing I want you to take away from this? It's simple. Small habits can transform your life. Not overnight, not instantly, not in some magical, dramatic way, but slowly, steadily, powerfully, because what you do every single day shapes who you become. And whether it's practicing English, building confidence, staying consistent, or pushing through challenges, it all comes down to one thing. Will you keep going? Not when it's easy, not when it's fun, but when it's boring, when it's frustrating, when you feel stuck, because that's the real test. And if you've made it this far, you already have what it takes. So don't stop now. Keep learning, keep growing, keep showing up, And before you know it, you'll look back and realize that one small habit, it changed everything. And now, before you go, if this podcast helped you, if you got even one useful insight from this, I want you to do two things. First, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another episode. And second, leave a comment and let me know. What's one small habit you're working on right now? Because I want to hear from you. I want to know what you're building, what you're learning, what you're pushing through. And I want you to know you're not alone in this. So hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep going.